Sarah Mitchell's heels clicked against the polished marble floors of the federal courthouse, each step echoing through the grand corridor like a metronome counting down her precious minutes. The morning sun streamed through towering windows, catching the scattered glitter on her navy blazer, a sparkly souvenir from her 7-year-old son Tommy's art presentation just 30 minutes ago. "Great job, buddy," she had whispered, hugging him tight before rushing out of his elementary school classroom. The pride in his eyes when he showed off his solar system diorama to his classmates had been worth rearranging her entire morning schedule. Now, glancing at her watch, she had exactly 3 minutes to make it to Judge William Bradford's courtroom for the Henderson case review. The security guard at the checkpoint, Marcus, recognized her immediately despite her casual attire. "Running a little late today, Ms. Mitchell?" he asked with a knowing smile, already familiar with her usually impeccable timing. Sarah returned his warm greeting as she placed her belongings in the security bin, her perfectly polished briefcase a stark contrast to her more relaxed appearance. "School presentation," she explained, quickly gathering her things. Tommy made Jupiter with 4 different types of glitter. She brushed at her blazer, sending a shimmer of red and gold particles floating in the morning light. "Sounds like quite the masterpiece," Marcus chuckled, handing her the visitor's clipboard out of habit before quickly pulling it back. "Oh, sorry. Force of habit. You're good to go, counselor." Sarah rounded the final corner, her mind already shifting to the case at hand. The Henderson file had kept her up until midnight. Something about the witness testimonies didn't quite align, and she needed to address these inconsistencies before they potentially derailed the prosecution's timeline. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, likely another message from her colleague David about the new evidence they'd uncovered. The heavy wooden doors of courtroom 306 loomed ahead. Through the narrow windows, she could see that proceedings had already begun. Judge Bradford's reputation for punctuality was legendary in the Southern District, matched only by his strict adherence to courtroom protocol. Sarah took a deep breath, adjusting her badge beneath her blazer. As she eased the door open, the familiar scent of aged wood and leather enveloped her. The courtroom was nearly full, the morning calendar typically packed with motion hearings and status conferences. She spotted her colleague David in the front row, his gray suit crisp and traditional, looking anxiously at his watch. The Henderson case was third on the docket, giving her just enough time to review their strategy one final time. Finding a spot in the back row, Sarah quietly slipped into the wooden bench, her casual attire feeling increasingly conspicuous among the sea of formal suits. Yet her mind remained focused on the task ahead. Years of experience had taught her that command of the law mattered far more than appearance. She pulled out her phone, keeping it low and silent, to check David's urgent messages about the case. The morning light filtering through the tall windows cast long shadows across the courtroom floor, and Judge Bradford's voice carried clearly as he addressed the current case before him. Sarah settled in, her prosecutor's instincts already analyzing the proceedings, unaware that her ordinary morning was about to take an unexpected turn. The quiet rustle of paper and soft murmur of whispered conversations filled courtroom 306 as Sarah reviewed the morning's documentation. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from David, this one marked urgent. She glanced at the screen, her breath catching slightly as she read. Key witness changed story. Need to discuss ASAP. Sarah's legal mind kicked into high gear. The Henderson case, scheduled for review in less than 20 minutes, hinged largely on witness testimony. Any change could dramatically affect their strategy. She looked toward the front row where David sat, his shoulders tense as he shuffled through a stack of papers, clearly agitated by the new development. The current case before Judge Bradford involved a property dispute, and Sarah used the time to observe his demeanor. The judge sat tall in his high-backed leather chair, his silver hair catching the morning light, his reputation for meticulous attention to detail evident in how he questioned each attorney. Every few minutes, his stern gaze swept the courtroom, lingering disapprovingly on any sign of disorder. Sarah needed to communicate with David before their case came up. She carefully gathered her files, and moved toward the gallery railing, planning to slip into the empty seat beside him. The wooden floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet, barely audible above the ongoing proceedings. Just a few more steps. Counselor. Judge Bradford's voice sliced through the air, though he was addressing the attorney before him. Please continue with your argument. His eyes, however, darted toward Sarah's movement with growing irritation. She paused, weighing her options. The witness information couldn't wait. It could change everything about their presentation. David turned slightly, catching Sarah's eye. He tilted his head toward the thick case file in his hands, then glanced meaningfully at his watch. They had practiced law together long enough to read each other's signals. Whatever had changed was significant enough to risk a quick consultation. Sarah took another careful step forward. The gallery bench ahead had plenty of room, and several other attorneys had shifted positions during the morning without incident. Yet something about her casual attire seemed to draw more attention, like a pebble disrupting the surface of a still pond. Just then, her phone buzzed again. David had sent another message. Witness claims new evidence could support our timeline. Sarah leaned forward, trying to get a better look at the document he was holding up discreetly. The morning sun streaming through the tall windows created a glare on the page, forcing her to move closer to the railing. That's when Judge Bradford's gavel cracked against his desk like a thunderclap. The sharp sound froze everyone in place. The property dispute attorney mid-sentence, the court reporter's fingers hovering above her stenotype, and Sarah, caught in an awkward half-step toward her colleague. The judge's steel-gray eyes locked onto her with laser focus, his expression darkening like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The courtroom fell into that special kind of silence that feels heavier than normal quiet, the kind that signals something significant is about to happen. Sarah straightened, her years of courtroom experience kicking in automatically. She could feel the weight of her federal prosecutor's badge beneath her blazer, still hidden from view, as Judge Bradford drew in a breath to speak. Judge William Bradford's voice filled the courtroom with practiced authority, each word measured and deliberate. "Young lady," he began, his tone carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench, "step forward, please." The property dispute attorney quietly took his seat, relief flickering across his face at the interruption. Sarah moved with measured grace toward the center of the courtroom, her case files held professionally against her chest. The scattered glitter on her blazer caught the morning light, tiny sparkles dancing against the mahogany panels behind her. She could feel dozens of eyes following her movement, the quiet rustle of shifting bodies in wooden benches. "This," Judge Bradford continued, gesturing to the grand space around them, "is a federal courthouse." He paused, letting the words settle. Not a casual gathering place for social interactions. His gaze swept over her attire, the blazer without a formal suit, the remnants of her morning at Tommy's school still evident in her appearance. From the corner of her eye, Sarah noticed David half rising from his seat, files in hand, clearly wanting to intervene. She gave him a subtle shake of her head. Through the years, she had learned that some moments required standing one's ground alone. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket, likely more case updates. But now wasn't the time. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice clear and professional. But Judge Bradford raised his hand, cutting her off. "I don't know if this is your first time in a federal courtroom," he continued, each word sharp with assumption, "but we maintain certain standards here. Standards of behavior, standards of dress, standards of respect for the proceedings." The judge leaned forward slightly, his reading glasses catching the light. "Standards that you seem to be unfamiliar with." Several attorneys in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Sarah recognized the subtle sound of pencils scratching paper, court reporters and law clerks documenting every word. She remained poised, one hand resting lightly on her badge, still concealed beneath her blazer. "Perhaps," Judge Bradford added, his tone suggesting he was building toward something, "you would benefit from observing proper courtroom protocol before attempting to participate in it." He reached for a court document, likely a formal warning citation, his silver pen poised to write. The morning sun had fully risen now, streaming through the tall windows and illuminating the entire courtroom in soft golden light. It highlighted the rich wood paneling, the brass fixtures, the American flag standing proud beside the judge's bench. All the symbols of justice that Sarah had dedicated her career to serving. She took a quiet breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Her case files, bearing the clear mark of the United States Attorney's Office, remained steady in her hands. The Henderson case documents contained within them would soon change this entire dynamic, but for now she waited. Years of prosecutorial experience had taught her the power of timing. Judge Bradford looked up from his citation form, his expression stern but tinged with what looked like satisfaction at teaching an important lesson. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" he asked, clearly expecting an apology or perhaps a nervous explanation. Sarah straightened her shoulders, the movement causing her blazer to shift slightly. The golden badge beneath it caught a ray of sunlight, sending a bright reflection across the courtroom wall. "Yes, Your Honor," she said calmly. "I believe I do." Sarah's moment of response hung in the air like suspended crystal. Every face in the courtroom turned toward her. She stepped forward with the quiet confidence earned from hundreds of court appearances, her movements deliberately measured and respectful. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed space, "I am Assistant United States Attorney Sarah Mitchell." She opened her blazer slightly, allowing her federal prosecutor's badge to catch the morning light. "I serve as lead prosecutor for the Southern District, and I'm scheduled to present the Henderson case before you this morning." The transformation in the courtroom was immediate yet subtle. A soft ripple of movement passed through the gallery as attorneys and clerks processed the revelation. Judge Bradford's pen paused mid-stroke on the citation form, a small drop of ink pooling beneath its tip on the unfinished warning. "I apologize for any disruption my movement may have caused," Sarah continued professionally, placing her case files on the counsel's table. The federal seal embossed on their covers faced the bench clearly. "My colleague, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen, was attempting to communicate urgent information regarding our witness testimony." David stood now, adding his presence to support her words. "Your Honor, if I may," he began, but Judge Bradford raised his hand slightly, his eyes still fixed on Sarah as he processed the complete reshaping of his assumptions. The morning sun continued its path through the tall windows, shifting the shadows in the courtroom. The same light that had earlier caught Tommy's art project glittered, now highlighted Sarah's impeccable case preparation spread before her, motion files, witness statements, and evidence documents all meticulously organized. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Bradford finally spoke, his voice carrying a notably different tone. He carefully set down his pen and removed his reading glasses, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "I see you're listed third on this morning's docket." He glanced at the calendar before him, as if seeing her name there for the first time. "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah responded, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Given the recent developments in witness testimony, I felt it crucial to consult with AUSA Chen before our presentation." She gestured to the files before her. "We've uncovered new evidence that significantly impacts our timeline." The judge nodded slowly, his earlier stern expression replaced by something more complex, a mixture of recognition, recalibration, and professional respect. The citation form lay forgotten on his bench, its unfinished words a testament to hasty judgment. "Very well, Counselor," he said, squaring his shoulders and adopting a purely professional tone. "When the current matter concludes, we'll hear your update on the Henderson case." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "I trust you're prepared to proceed." Sarah allowed herself a small, confident smile. "Fully prepared, Your Honor." She adjusted her files with practiced efficiency, the morning's earlier tension transforming into focused energy. Behind her, the gallery had settled back into its routine, but there was a different quality to the atmosphere now, a reminder that appearances and assumptions often mask deeper truths. The property dispute attorney rose to continue his interrupted argument, but few in the courtroom were fully focused on his words. They had just witnessed something more significant. a moment where professionalism and identity intersected to challenge comfortable assumptions, creating ripples that would extend far beyond this single morning in Courtroom 306. As the property dispute case concluded, Sarah used the brief recess to confer with David about their witness developments. The courtroom's atmosphere had shifted subtly. Side conversations carried a different energy, and occasional glances were directed toward both Sarah and Judge Bradford, measuring the space between them like invisible threads. "The witness statement changes actually strengthen our case," David whispered, sliding a document across the table. His earlier anxiety had transformed into focused preparation. "Look at the timeline correlation." He pointed to a highlighted section, careful to keep his voice low and professional. Sarah nodded, quickly absorbing the new information. The glitter on her blazer caught the light as she leaned forward, adding an unexpectedly whimsical touch to the serious moment. A few seats away, she noticed a young law clerk watching them with poorly concealed interest, clearly having witnessed the earlier exchange. Judge Bradford returned to the bench, his robes settling around him as he took his seat. His usual commanding presence carried a slightly different note now, the stern authority tempered with something more reflective. He adjusted his microphone, glancing briefly at Sarah before addressing the courtroom. "We'll proceed with the United States versus Henderson," he announced, his voice clear and professional. "Counsel for the government, you may approach." The familiar words carried extra weight in the wake of the morning's misunderstanding. Sarah rose smoothly, her case files organized and ready. As she moved toward the podium, she felt the gentle weight of her phone in her pocket. A new message from Tommy's teacher, showing photos from the morning's presentation. The two worlds of her life continued to weave together, neither diminishing the other. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and respect. "The government has new evidence regarding witness testimony that significantly impacts our case timeline." She proceeded to outline the developments, her presentation crisp and compelling. Judge Bradford listened intently, his engagement with the legal arguments demonstrating his true prowess on the bench. He asked precise questions, challenging specific points with the expertise that had earned him his reputation. Their professional interaction showed no trace of the earlier confrontation. Instead, it highlighted the quality of legal discourse that was possible when assumptions fell away. The morning sun had shifted again, casting different shadows across the courtroom's rich wooden features. Sarah smoothly addressed each of the judge's questions, her casual blazer now seeming less relevant than the sharp intelligence and preparation she displayed. From the gallery, David nodded approvingly at key points, their teamwork evident in the seamless presentation. "Thank you, Counselor," Judge Bradford said as she concluded, using the formal address with genuine respect. "The court appreciates your thorough preparation and clear presentation of these developments." His tone carried a subtle note of something more, perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps reflection. Sarah gathered her materials, sensing the collective attention of the courtroom. This moment was about more than just a case presentation. It represented the intersection of perception and reality, of quick judgments and deeper truths. As she returned to her seat, she noticed a few encouraging smiles from other attorneys who had witnessed the full arc of the morning's events. The next case was called, and the routine of the court continued. But something had shifted in Courtroom 306, a reminder that true professional respect transcended surface appearances, and that sometimes the most powerful statements were made not through confrontation, but through quiet competence. Later that afternoon, Sarah sat in her office reviewing case notes when a gentle knock interrupted her concentration. Lisa Torres, a fellow prosecutor from the criminal division, stood in the doorway with 2 coffee cups in hand. The rich aroma of fresh espresso filled the air as she entered. "Thought you might need this after this morning's excitement," Lisa said, placing 1 cup on Sarah's desk. She settled into the visitor's chair, her expression both amused and understanding. Word travels fast in the federal building. Sarah accepted the coffee with a grateful smile, noting how the morning's glitter had migrated from her blazer to her case files, creating an unexpectedly festive effect on the serious documents. Tommy's art project keeps making surprise appearances, she said, brushing at the sparkles. I heard you handled it beautifully, Lisa commented, taking a sip from her own cup. You know, something similar happened to me last month in Judge Rodriguez's courtroom. The clerk kept asking if I was waiting for my attorney to arrive. She shook her head, sharing a knowing look with Sarah. The late afternoon sun slanted through Sarah's office windows, illuminating the framed photos on her wall, her law school graduation, her first major case win, and Tommy's recent school picture. Each image represented a different facet of her journey, now seeming more interconnected than ever. The interesting part, Sarah reflected, turning her coffee cup thoughtfully, was watching the shift in the room. It wasn't just about correcting a mistake. It was about challenging comfortable assumptions. She paused, remembering the morning's events. Judge Bradford's questions during the Henderson case presentation were actually quite insightful. Just then, David appeared in the doorway, case files tucked under his arm. Sarah, you're not going to believe this. Judge Bradford just signed off on our motion for the Henderson evidence, with additional time granted for witness preparation. He handed her the document, its official seal gleaming. He also asked his clerk to distribute a memo about updated courtroom protocol. Lisa added, pulling up an email on her phone. It emphasizes focusing on legal arguments rather than appearances. No specific mention of this morning, but the timing isn't subtle. Sarah reviewed the approved motion, noting the judge's careful attention to their legal arguments. His detailed comments showed genuine engagement with the case's complexities, demonstrating the kind of thorough judicial review that had earned him respect in the legal community. You know what surprised me most? David said, leaning against the doorframe. How you turned it into a teaching moment without making it confrontational. That's going to have more impact than any formal complaint could have. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing. Another message from Tommy's teacher. This time, it was a photo of his completed solar system project, proudly displayed in the school hallway. The glitter that had caused such a stir in court now sparkled on Jupiter's rings, capturing the same morning sunlight in a different context. Sometimes our most professional moments come when we're not trying to prove anything, Sarah said, showing them Tommy's project photo. We're just doing our jobs, being ourselves, and letting our work speak for itself. Lisa and David nodded in agreement as the afternoon light continued to shift, casting long shadows across the office. Outside, the busy sounds of the federal building carried on, a constant reminder of the important work that happened here every day, performed by professionals of all backgrounds, each bringing their own unique perspective to the pursuit of justice. 2 days later, Sarah was gathering her materials after a successful preliminary hearing when Judge Bradford's clerk approached her outside the courtroom. The judge would like to see you in his chambers, if you have a moment, she said quietly, her expression neutral but respectful. Sarah followed the clerk through the quiet corridor to the judge's chambers, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. This time, she wore her usual court attire, a tailored charcoal suit that Tommy called her superhero outfit. A single sparkle of glitter still clung to her briefcase, a tiny reminder of that memorable morning. Judge Bradford stood as she entered, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating shelves lined with law books and family photos. A framed picture of a young woman in judicial robes caught Sarah's attention. The judge's daughter, she realized, who had recently been appointed to the state court. Thank you for making time, Ms. Mitchell, he began, his tone professional but warmer than their previous interactions. I've been reviewing your work on the Henderson case. Your handling of the witness testimony changes was exemplary. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But that's not why I asked you here. Sarah sat comfortably, her posture relaxed but professional. I appreciate your attention to the case, Your Honor. The witness developments have opened some interesting legal questions. Indeed. He nodded, then gestured to the photos Sarah had noticed. My daughter Michelle called me yesterday. Apparently, she experienced something similar in her first week on the bench. A slight smile crossed his face. She reminded me rather pointedly about the importance of looking beyond first impressions. The morning light shifted as clouds passed outside, creating patterns on the rich wooden desk between them. A law journal lay open, its pages marked with careful notes. Evidence of the judge's renowned attention to detail now focused on a different kind of learning. "You know," he continued, "I've spent 30 years trying to maintain the highest standards in my courtroom. Sometimes I've realized that focus on standards can become—" He paused, searching for the right word, "rigid." Sarah considered her response thoughtfully. "Standards and respect are crucial in our profession," she offered. "But they manifest in many ways. Your daughter must be proud to follow in your footsteps." "She is." He smiled genuinely now. "Though she tells me I have a few things to learn from her generation." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "The face of justice is changing, Ms. Mitchell. Perhaps it's time some of our assumptions changed with it." From her chair, Sarah could see both the judge and the reflection of his daughter's photo, two generations of legal minds bridging understanding. The moment felt significant but comfortable, like the natural evolution of respect between colleagues. "The Henderson case goes to trial next month," Judge Bradford said, turning back to face her. "I look forward to seeing your arguments in court." His tone carried the weight of professional respect earned rather than assumed. As Sarah stood to leave, she noticed something she had missed before. A child's art project displayed discreetly on a side shelf, its edges still bearing traces of glitter from years past. Some experiences, it seemed, transcended professional boundaries, creating unexpected bridges of understanding in the most formal of settings. 1 month later, Sarah stood before Judge Bradford's bench, presenting closing arguments in the Henderson trial. The courtroom hadn't changed. The same morning light still streamed through tall windows. The same rich wooden panels still gleamed with decades of polish. But something else had shifted, subtle yet significant. "The evidence clearly demonstrates," Sarah articulated, her voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and clarity, "that the defendant's actions were not only premeditated but calculated to deceive." She moved with confident ease before the jury, her professional presence commanding attention. Judge Bradford listened intently, his engagement evident in his thoughtful questions and careful consideration of each point. Their professional interaction had evolved into something approaching a mentor-colleague relationship, each bringing their unique perspective to the pursuit of justice. In the gallery, Tommy sat quietly beside Lisa, attending his first real court proceeding. At 10 years old, he found the whole process fascinating, especially watching his mother in action. Sarah had explained to him how the justice system worked, and now he was seeing it firsthand. His latest art project, a carefully drawn courtroom scene, peeked from his notebook. "Members of the jury," Sarah continued, approaching the jury box with measured steps, "the prosecution has demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that—" She paused briefly, noting a young female law student in the gallery furiously taking notes, clearly inspired by seeing a woman command the federal courtroom. The morning sun caught Sarah's federal prosecutor's badge, now worn proudly visible on her suit jacket. The same light illuminated Judge Bradford's bench, where a small framed photo had recently appeared, his daughter Michelle in her judicial robes, standing beside him at her swearing-in ceremony. As Sarah concluded her arguments, Judge Bradford's clerk distributed documents to counsel. Sarah noticed something new. The clerk now treated every person in the courtroom with the same level of professional respect, regardless of their appearance or apparent status. Small changes, rippling outward. "The court will reconvene tomorrow morning for the jury's verdict," Judge Bradford announced, his voice carrying its usual authority but with an added note of inclusivity. "Ms. Mitchell, excellent presentation of the evidence. Counsel, be prepared for any necessary sentencing arguments." After the court adjourned, Tommy rushed to hug his mother, his eyes bright with pride. "Mom, you were amazing," he whispered loudly. Sarah smiled, remembering how a simple school art project had inadvertently sparked such meaningful change. "Your mother is one of our finest prosecutors," Judge Bradford commented, approaching them as he left the bench. He smiled at Tommy, then turned to Sarah. The Henderson case has set some important precedents, both legal and otherwise. Lisa joined them, case files in hand. The new attorneys in orientation were asking about you, Sarah. Seems your reputation for handling that morning has become something of a teaching moment in the federal building. Sarah watched as Tommy pulled out his drawing to show the judge, a colorful rendering of the courtroom where his mother worked, complete with carefully added glitter highlights. Judge Bradford accepted the artwork with genuine interest, recognizing in the boy's pride a reflection of his own relationship with Michelle. The afternoon light painted long shadows across the courtroom floor as they gathered their belongings. Outside these walls, the world was slowly changing, one small interaction at a time. Sometimes the most powerful changes came not from grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but from simple moments of understanding, rippling outward like light through those tall courtroom windows, touching everything in their path with the potential for transformation.